Just do that again.
Tells me he did a little Abner in 1940.
Yeah.
I like that movie, and here he is in a small bit part.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're still on.
Wow. Well, folks, kind of fits the movie we're talking about. Smokey and I are talking a little bit about one of our favorite comedians, Buster Keaton. Now, from my recollection, I don't think we've shown any Buster Keatons on our show. And that's sort of too bad. We've shown one of the great people who've kind of followed in his tradition, Jacques Tati, okay, with Mon Oncle, right? One of the great films. Keaton. To me, okay, well, we think of the great silent comedians. You know, you think of Chaplin, you think of maybe a Harold Lloyd or a Langdon and folks like that, and of course you think of Keaton. And Keaton is, to me, the filmmaker's dream. And for a person who really likes film and filmmaking, his films are more dynamic. And I don't mean this as a criticism of Charlie Chaplin, but he stinks. But anyway, the idea is that Buster Keaton's films are much more dynamic. He uses the frame in a much more interestingly cinematic way. His stunts are remarkable, and he uses the long take and the deep focus type of mentality for his films to great purpose. And what film are we seeing tonight? Gosh, kind of carrying on here and forgetting what film we're talking about here, Smokey. The General, 1927. Now, stacked up with all of the feature films that he has made, Sherlock Jr. might be up there at the top along with The General, but I have a soft spot for The General. The General is a remarkable film, 1927. I have a feeling, too, and I've read that this is really one of Keaton's favorite films. It dealt with a passion of his own. Trains, the engine, the locomotive. This is a Civil War film, and it deals with Buster Keaton, who plays Johnny Gray. Johnny Gray is an engineer of the General. That's the name of the train that he runs down south. And the war breaks out, and everybody starts going out and enlisting in the war, and his girlfriend expects him to enlist too. This is your typical Buster Keaton type of plot. The heroine wants him to succeed by getting a uniform or making good. Well, he's going to go out and he wants to enlist, but well, they won't let him because he's more valuable as an engineer than as a soldier. And of course, nobody believes him when that case comes about. They think he's a coward and things. So, you know, her brother goes off and everybody goes off and joins the military. And he has to stay behind and run the train. Keep those trains running. Well, I don't want to go too far into the plot of what happens, but certainly things do work out for Mr. Gray and for his girlfriend. Now, this is an interesting film in the way that it was shot. Keaton wanted to be very realistic in the way that this film was shot. He wanted to use a narrow gauge track and narrow gauge train. And there were very few of those, if any, left in the country at the time of 26-27 when this film was made. And through his research, he found one left up in Oregon. This is shot in Cottage Grove, Oregon. And, of course, they had to figure this out, that they had to have a narrow gauge track along of a normal gauge track so that a train could be running parallel to the other train that they're shooting so that the camera could be mounted on one so they could shoot the other. So there was a lot of logistics that had to be sort of come together for this General to work. Likewise, the great pivotal sequence in here where the General, I'm going to give a little bit away here, where the General actually, the train crashes into the river down below. A bridge is on fire and it crashes. That train is actually, now I have not seen it, but I've heard people who have said, and I was just on a website about Cottage Grove, that still claims that you can see that same train laying down there in the bottom of the river. Now, the General has a remarkable look. If I wanted to think about Civil War films and films that pop up as being authentic types of Civil War films that have the great look and the great feel and capture that moment, there are actually a very few films that I would list. Certainly I would list Birth of a Nation. That's the beginning of it all, okay? Maybe his politics, Griffith's politics, were all off, obviously. Very racist film, but the look and the authenticity of his Civil War battles, etc., very, very sharp. Likewise, believe it or not, I would put The Good, Bad, and the Ugly by Sergio Leone up there as well. There is a great Civil War film. It's interesting. The Civil War, in a way, works better. I like films that deal with the Civil War as a backdrop rather than films that are about the Civil War. This film uses the capture of the train and the kidnapping of Annabelle Lee and all of that stuff as a backdrop of the Civil War as a means to allow Buster Keaton to do his typical prove himself, okay, and show how good he is with stunts and with machinery. That's one of the key themes of his films, is the frustration over machinery and man's ability to conquer those machines. Okay, but you think of The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. That's not a Civil War film per se, but the Civil War is going on behind the scenes, and it actually adds a great deal of color. So we have a lot of nice stuff going on that way. I would have to put those three films, and I'd put The General up there as well as being one of the great Civil War films of all time. This was a film that was directed by Clyde Bruckman and Buster Keaton. Bruckman was sort of a side guy for Keaton. You know that Keaton really called a lot of the shots. Marion Mack is in this film. She plays Annabelle Lee. She was actually more famous as a screen centerist, wrote a lot of screenplays and things rather than working with acting. This is one of her sole big acting job. Now, I think you're going to have fun with this film. I think that The General is one that will be a nice way to spend the evening. I really love this movie. It's remarkable. It's one of the great Buster Keaton films of all time. And I am a great follower of the Keaton work and the Keaton films. Be they shorts, be they the features that he worked with in the silent period, and even be they the beach party movies that he made in the 60s for American International. Because even there, he's working great. And you know, no better time to spend an evening with Buster Keaton. Let's roll him, Smokey.